Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. South Korea's Constitutional Court unanimously removes President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. The decision follows his December declaration of martial law, which triggered outrage and a parliamentary vote to impeach. Global stocks tumble after President Donald Trump announces wide-ranging tariffs. The move fuels fears over higher prices and supply shocks, sending the S&P 500 to a COVID-era low. The 6th BIMSTEC summit begins in Bangkok with leaders from 7 nations in attendance. Talks centre on trade, security, climate action across the Bay of Bengal. Russia launches a wave of drone attacks on eastern Ukraine, killing 3 and wounding dozens. Kharkiv bears the brunt as fighting escalates across the region. The United Nations opens a formal inquiry into an Israeli strike that killed 15 medics. The human rights chief warns that the incident may constitute a war crime. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warns that any US move to annex Greenland. She speaks in Nuuk, the capital, where she calls for partnership in Arctic security and not a takeover. The Pentagon investigates a signal chat leak linked to Fox. Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, a journalist, was added to a group where military plans in Yemen were being discussed. Fierce storms slam the central United States, killing 7 and flooding towns. Officials warn of historic rainfall and extreme damage in days to come. We move on with our top story today. President Donald Trump's tariffs have caused chaos in global markets, with stock markets in the US, Europe and Asia plunging in response. The S&P 500 saw its biggest loss since 2020, dropping 4.8%, while the Nasdaq fell 6% and the Dow Jones dropped 4%. Trump remained defiant, insisting that the US economy will come out stronger after these measures. He has claimed that the US is undergoing a massive economic restructuring. Countries are already responding to Trump's tariffs, with Canada announcing a 25% tariff on US auto imports that don't comply with trade agreement standards. Additionally, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has welcomed her country's exemption from Trump's latest tariffs. She credited Mexico's good relationship with the US for the exclusion, which is crucial for Mexico as the country is highly dependent on trade with the United States. Sheinbaum also stressed the importance of maintaining strong bilateral ties. Let's listen in to what Carney and Sheinbaum had to say.
And today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the US approach, with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement, and on the non-Canadian content of CUSMA-compliant vehicles from the United States as well. Our tariffs, though, unlike the US tariffs, will not.
En el caso de México, pues no hay aranceles adicionales y eso es bueno para el país.
The IMF has cautioned that these tariffs represent a significant risk to the global economic outlook, with responsible negative impacts on global trade. We are joined by Daniel Boardman, senior correspondent for the National Telegraph, located in Toronto, Canada, to discuss this further. Daniel, thank you very much for joining us. We've seen 24 hours since these tariffs have been announced, and we've seen nothing but fallout. Is this more that we can expect?
Yeah. the great hope is that, Trump learns that fire is hot and causing a global economic meltdown to tariff a bunch of penguins isn't the smartest idea, and there's a readjustment. But right now, it's all just very baffling. This is, to see Bernie Sanders' economic policies being trumpeted by, the political right is a bit of a bizarro world. And again, especially in Canada and the U.S. So Canada's actually been exempt from most of the tariffs because I think they managed to say, why are you tariffing the trade agreements you made when you were Trump 1.0, when you ripped up NAFTA and made it so much better? So there is a direct economic suicide of a North American trade war, because the Canadian auto industry, when we're talking about American auto industry, Canadian auto industry, they're integrated, right? Name the type of cars that Canada builds. It's, American manufacturing, right? We're ingrained in their supply chain. They are in ours. So any U.S. tariff or any Canadian tariff on Canadian and U.S. auto industry is a double tariff, because it does tariff both sides, because it's vitally interconnected. So we have this rhetoric cluster where it's pretty clear that the White House doesn't fully understand what they're doing with a tariff trade war. And how could they? I mean, Trump didn't specifically run on okay, we're going to literally tariff every single country out there. And then within a few months, they've come up with this,
Yes.
master plan that again is tariffing an island full of penguins that people don't live on. So, I mean, this thing should be doged by the Trump administration's own ethos. I mean, someone needs to get doged for the rollout of this thing, because it's not good. Free trade is good, and this is going to make literally everything much more expensive. And any technology or any modern thing is not just made in one country.
Daniel, let me try and phrase this correctly. Donald Trump, as you can see in those visuals, is holding up a big board of every single country, and he's saying which country is charging the US a certain amount. And Donald Trump has floated a reciprocal tariff, a discounted reciprocal tariff. Now countries are now going back and saying that we are going to charge you the same amount. How does that make sense? If this country is already charging the US this much money, surely it doesn't make any difference. Could you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so this is I mean, pure economic illiteracy. This is a global war to see who can throw reality out the window the fastest. So Trump is very concerned about trade surpluses and that's net goods, the whole calculation here. But Trump's major basic assumption is if we're trading more with them and receiving less money, then they're taking advantage of us. But of course, the country of Canada and the United States, they have 10 times our population. The country of 300 million people is going to make more things than the country of 30 million people. And the things that the country of 30 million people sell, on average, will reach a larger consumer market of the 300 million people. Everyone's still making money off there. This isn't the fact that they're buying more per capita, more from Canada than Canada's buying the United States makes a lot of sense, because think of how many much more Americans there are and how rich America is, and that's their purchasing power. So Trump's entire thesis on tariffs is basically being punitive on American purchasing power, which is the central strength of the American Western alliance. So he's undermining the own economic power of America to restore America global dominance is the fundamental economic basis of this, and it's insane. It's Bernie Sanders level insanity. It's a Justin Trudeau. I live in Canada. I've seen Justin Trudeau grow the economy from the heart outwards. This is growing the economy from the heart outwards.
Daniel Boardman, thank you very much for joining us. Apologies, we have run out of time. We move on now to some more news. Amid United States push for a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire, the strikes continue. The Russian drones have killed at least 3 people and injured dozens in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. The attack targeted residential and office buildings in the city of Kharkiv, causing several fires and leaving 32 people injured, including a child. Meanwhile, Trump is pushing for warmer relations with Moscow, reaching out to President Vladimir Putin and Russian officials in the hope of brokering a ceasefire in the three-year war. Meanwhile, Kirill Dmitriev, head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund and President Vladimir Putin's special envoy, has visited Washington. As per reports, he discussed potential cooperation with the United States in the Arctic and on rare earth metals, but also acknowledged that there are disagreements. He also added that there was also active work on restoring air travel, and we hope to make progress on this issue, he said. The White House has not commented on the talks, but they came as President Donald Trump has pushed for a thaw in ties with the Russian capital, while also expressing frustration at the lack of progress in halting the conflict that has ravaged Ukraine since Russia's 2022. Putin last month rejected a US-Ukrainian proposal for a full and unconditional ceasefire and has made a US proposed truce in the Black Sea dependent on the West lifting sanctions. We now move to the Indo-Pacific, where South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been removed from office after a ruling by the Constitutional Court. The court has upheld a parliamentary impeachment motion against him. This was over his decision to impose martial law last year, which led to a political crisis. This decision means a new presidential election must take place within 60 days. Until then, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will act as the president. The court stated that Yoon violated his presidential duty by declaring martial law, calling it a serious challenge to democracy. The court also said that his actions caused chaos in many areas of South Korean society, including the economy and foreign policy. Let's listen in.
법치국가 원리와 민주국가 원리의 기본 원칙들을 위반한 것으로 그 자체로 헌법 질서를 침해하고 민주공화정의 안정성에 심각한 위해를 끼쳤습니다. 재판관 전원의 일치된 의견으로 주문을 선고합니다. 탄핵 사건이므로 선고 시각을 확인하겠습니다. 지금 시각은 오전 11시 22분입니다. 주문, 피청구인 대통령 윤석열을.
Supporters of Yoon were angry about the decision, while anti-Yoon protesters celebrated the ruling out in the streets. The court rejected Yoon's claim that martial law was necessary to protect the country. It said that his decree lacked legal justification. The country's markets were unchanged after the ruling, and authorities are preparing for the upcoming election. Yoon is also facing a criminal trial for his actions, including insurrection charges. This whole crisis began when Yoon declared martial law to deal with the opposition party's alleged abuse of parliamentary majority, but it was lifted within a few hours. We are joined by Professor Madhav Nalaput, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Nalaput. This has obviously been an extremely lengthy process with the former, now South Korean president. What does this say about the state of South Korean democracy right now, this ruling by the Constitutional Court of South Korea?
Well, quite frankly, with all the respect to the courts in South Korea, I'd like to say it's a blow against democracy for a simple reason that President Yoon, before he was impeached, took a very strong stand where the Indo-Pacific was concerned. He took a very, very strong stand, together with Japan, a traditional adversary of South Korea. He stood side by side with Japan and the United States in working together for a free and open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. And that's critical, Indo-Pacific security. So I'd like to say, I don't think his departure is good news, unless the successor who wins the elections becomes, equally committed to Yoon's policy. And as for martial law, in a matter of a few hours, it was lifted. I don't think any serious damage was done to Korea. So I respectfully like to disagree with the South Korean Constitutional Court. I think, frankly, this has weakened democracy. Street power has removed Yoon, and regrettably, the Constitutional Court has sealed its approval on that street power.
Professor Nalapat, people would say, critics would say that's very strong wording. This seems to have gone through the full democratic, throughout the whole proper court process. What do you have to say? Why is this such an attack on democracy? Obviously, this specific case was centered around that declaration of martial law in December.
Look, the declaration itself was withdrawn in 6 hours. It was done at night. Yoon made a mistake. Leaders in power make mistakes, and I don't think he should have paid this higher price for that. As I said, the only consolation will be if his successor follows his policies without following the obviously very bad example of martial law. That's a panic reaction and a wrong reaction in a country like South Korea, where martial law has a horrible history behind it of persecution and, in fact, killings of innocent people, jailing, imprisonment, so many things. So I'd like to say that Yoon made a mistake in declaring martial law. There's no question about it. And if his successor, who gets elected, is committed to the same policy as Yoon, there'd be no problem. The worry is if a successor is committed who is basically in tune with a much less, if I may say so, much less strong policy regarding securing the Indo-Pacific. That is not going to be good news for the alliance of the democracies that's trying to keep the Indo-Pacific safe.
Professor Nalaput, I just wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of final points. Obviously, South Korea now has to hold an election within the next 60 days. I would like your thoughts on that, and also the continuous ongoing trial of Yoon Suk-yeol, this time a criminal trial where he faces charges of insurrection because of this declaration of martial law on December, where he could face life in prison and in very extreme circumstances, even the death penalty. What are your thoughts?
Look, I'd like to say that I had pointed out from the very beginning in 2021 end itself that the prosecution, I used to sometimes call it the persecution of Donald Trump, would rebound on the Democrats and on President Biden. And lo and behold, it has happened. The reality is that this kind of a criminal procedure against a now impeached president, I mean, he committed these acts, so to speak, while he was president. And as president, he had a certain degree of immunity. So I'm quite surprised that was completely neglected by the court, because if a president does not have sufficient immunity, the president cannot act with force and dispatch, and the president will hesitate. And that's not going to be the benefit of South Korea. South Korea developed enormously as a result of quick decisions taken by a smoothly functioning system. That system appears to have been severely disrupted, and hence my apprehension. Again, I repeat, if the successor follows Yoon's policies without his mistake of declaring martial law, of course, well, I think that will be a satisfactory outcome.
Professor Madhav Nalaput, thank you very much for joining us. We move on once again. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has strongly rejected repeated demands from President Donald Trump and his administration for the United States to take control of Greenland. Speaking from Greenland, Frederiksen emphasized this isn't just a joke about Greenland or Denmark. It's about the world order we've built together across the Atlantic over generations, she said. While Greenland is officially part of Denmark, it has self-rule over most internal affairs, with Denmark handling foreign policy and defense. Trump's interest in Greenland stems from its strategic location, its resources, and the growing threats from Russia and China in the Arctic region. Fredriksson highlighted Denmark's security efforts, including new Arctic ships, long-range drones and enhanced satellite capacity, and invited the US to work alongside Denmark as NATO allies to booster Arctic security. Her remarks come just days after a controversial visit by US Vice President J.D. Vance, who suggested Denmark wasn't doing enough to secure the island. Fredriksson also called his comments unfair. Let's hear what she had to say about the annexation and Arctic security.
Talking about security, then there is a lot that we and you can do. Denmark is now strengthening our own presence. New Arctic ships, long-range drones and satellite capacity. We uphold our commitments and more is on its way. It has, by the way, always been a common task to safeguard security in the Arctic, so that small countries don't have to fear big ones. And so, this is not only about Greenland or Denmark. This is about the world order that we have built together across the Atlantic over generations. You cannot annex another country, not even with an argument about international security.
Let's turn to the Middle East now, where the deaths of 15 medics and humanitarian workers in Gaza have raised concerns of potential war crimes by the Israeli military, according to UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk. He condemned the killings, calling for an independent investigation. The bodies of the victims, including staff from the Palestinian Red Crescent and the United Nations, were found in a mass grave near Rafah. Israeli forces claim the incident was an attack on terrorists. However, evidence suggests that some of the workers were alive while under Israeli control. The situation was described as a dark moment for humanity by the Palestinian Red Crescent's president, who demanded justice. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations argued for the better vetting of humanitarian organizations, claiming that Hamas terrorists were traveling in ambulances. Turk also criticized Israel's blockade of Gaza and its actions which may violate international law. Here's what Volker Turk, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said.
I'm appalled by the recent killings of 15 medical personnel and humanitarian aid workers, which raise further concerns over the commission of war crimes by the Israeli military. There must be an independent, prompt, and thorough investigation into the killings, and those responsible for any violation of international law must be held to account.
The Pentagon's Inspector General is investigating Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of unclassified messaging app Signal to coordinate US airstrikes on Yemen's Houthis. The inquiry will assess whether Hegseth followed Defense Department guidelines, especially regarding classified information. The leaked messages included sensitive details like precise times for the strikes, which could have jeopardized the operational security if intercepted. Hegseth claims no classified information was shared, but the messages raised concerns about leaks that could endanger US personnel. The investigation will focus on compliance with security, classification, and records retention policies. The leak occurred after journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was accidentally added to the group chat. Senate Democrat Jack Reed warned that the leak could have put the US pilots at risk. We move to South Asia now, where the 6th BIMSTEC summit opened in Bangkok with the signing of key agreements, including the BIMSTEC Agreement on Maritime Transport Cooperation and 2 memorandums of understanding with the Indian Ocean Rim Association. The summit began with speeches from BIMSTEC Chair Pengtontan Shinawatra and other leaders. A draft declaration outlining regional cooperation was finalized during the senior officials meeting, along with other discussions on the BIMSTEC Center of Excellence on Tropical Medicine and Disaster Management Initiatives. Meanwhile, Nepal's Prime Minister Oli held several bilateral meetings with Sri Lanka's Harini Amarasuriya, Myanmar's Ming Yanghing and Bhutan's Tobse, focusing on climate change, investment and strengthening regional ties. Oli also met with Thai business leaders, emphasizing Nepal's commitment to fostering investment opportunities. The summit highlighted BIMSTEC's ongoing focus on regional cooperation in key sectors such as trade, security, and climate change. Over to the US once again, where President Donald Trump has said that his administration is very close to a deal for TikTok, which faces a US ban if it's not sold by this weekend. Trump told reporters on Air Force One that the deal involves multiple investors, but didn't give any details. TikTok, a popular app with over 170 million US users, must separate from its Chinese owner ByteDance or face a ban under US law. The law cites national security concerns, believing TikTok could be controlled by the Chinese government. Trump is confident a buyer will be found in the time and suggested that TikTok deal could be part of a larger agreement with China to ease the tariffs. He said China could approve the deal if it makes the US concession on tariffs.
We're very close to a deal with a very good group of people for TikTok.
Larry Ellison, or is it multiple investors? Just
Multiple.
Fierce storms swept across a wide area of the central eastern United States overnight, leaving at least 7 people dead, with officials warning that the severe weather is still ongoing. The storm system stretching from Arkansas to Ohio has caused multiple tornadoes and heavy rainfall, with more severe weather expected in the coming days. Western Tennessee bore the brunt of the storm, with at least 5 fatalities reported in several counties. The National Weather Service has issued a warning for potentially record-breaking rainfall, which may result in catastrophic flooding by tomorrow. Schools are closed in many areas, including Nashville. According to the Power Outage US website, approximately 230,000 individuals are currently experiencing power cuts in the impacted region. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.